Welcome into the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Make sure to check out 5reasonsports.com. Spell it out for all of our podcasts, not just 5 on the Floor, but also 3 yards per carry on the Dolphins, 5 Rings Canes, Balls Cast, Light Skinned Opinions, Shula Bowl, and more. Also, all of our columns, our articles, our YouTube channel, and our merchandise. The entire month of May, 10% off everything on the site if you spend $30 or more. So spend $30, basically 2 t-shirts, and you will get 10% off your entire order. Also, if you get more than one, you save on the handling. So check that out, our Tua shirts, our BAM shirts. And yes, we know there are COVID delays. We've told you about them, but trust me, those delays are not as long as you're getting from the NBA and NFL shops right now. So check out those t-shirts on 5reasonsports.com. Also, check out our new sponsors. We've got a ton of sponsors. They're all South Florida. They're South Florida sports fans. They've helped us through the COVID crisis. Help them out. Check them out. These are all great companies. And like I said, South Florida sports fans. The newest one is You Break It, Wheel Fix It. That's WHELL for the You Break It, Wheel Fix It, wheel repair and remanufacturing company. They do a lot of different stuff. And one of the things they do is powder coating for custom color changes on wheels. So go to youbreakitwheelfixit.com. If you're tired of your wheels, you want to give your car a new and refreshed look by powder coating them a new color. You can do heat, you can do hurricanes, you can do dolphins, do whatever you want. If your wheels are faded and scratched, renew them with their in-house wheel refinishing. If you got to repair damaged wheels that are curved, bent, or cracked, this is the place to go to. 15 years of experience based in North Miami, right off 146th Street. And if you give them the code 5 Reasons Wheels, that's 5 Reasons Wheels, you get 10% off on a 4-wheel repair or refinishing with that code. Check out the gallery of the work that's at their Instagram account. You Break It, Wheel Fix It. And now, today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back. Not only do we have a full crew, we've added to it today. We've got 4 on the floor today. Myself, Alex Toledo, Alphonse Sidney, also joined by Greg Sylvander. You know him as Lefty Leif. Last time I think you were with me, we were putting that 30-man team together, and then Alf botched his team. But that's okay. Good to have you back, Leif.
Did you ever get Leif's opinion on the matter?
We never got your opinion. We did get the 2 opinions that mattered, which were George Sedano's and Eric Reed, and they both picked my team. So do you have something different to say?
I liked Alf's team a lot more than people, particularly on the podcast and social media did. But ultimately, I would say that I probably would go with one of you or Alex. But ultimately, I think that Alf got beat up a little bit too much.
Good way to cover all your bases.
Yep, that's the diplomatic response.
I mean, there were 3 teams. Only 2 of them were going to make the finals. You eliminated the proper team. That's all that matters. So, Alf, better luck next time. Perhaps in 30 years we'll do this again. There'll be new players, and we'll go through a list of other 30 guys. So,
geez, if I'm doing this in 30 years, shoot me in the face.
Well, if there's still basketball in 30 years, I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be basketball next year. All right, let's get to
if I'm 70 years old doing podcasts, oh my God.
This is the wave. This is the wave of the future, man. This is the wave of the future. So
I hope I'm retired and gardening or on a beach drinking something with an umbrella in it.
You know how I realized how old I was? Yesterday was the 35th anniversary of my bar mitzvah. Okay, that will make you feel old. Because I was supposed to become a man then, it still hasn't.
Yeah, I saw that on Instagram. I don't know why you kept celebrating that and like reminding people.
I don't know. I mean, I just thrown it out there that I used to have hair. That's all. Like that's the big thing. Like I've gone from used to having hair to now my hair is so bad that I desperately needed a haircut. Yeah, it's just there's the proof that I had hair. All right, let's get to today's topic. The Last Dance is over. 10 episodes, 5 Sundays, gave us something to do. I'll say worst case scenario, whether people liked it or they didn't, they gave us something to do for 2 hours on Sunday nights, other than drink. And we do that on Friday nights on 5 Reasons to Drink. So we're going to give our last thoughts on Last Dance. So everybody's going to bring a topic here tonight, maybe something that other people are not thinking about. I'll start with you, Alf. You've been the most candid, I would say, to the negative side about this documentary. What is your sort of defining thought, or what are you bringing to the table today?
You probably should have went to Debbie Downer on this whole thing. Horace Grant kind of summed it up pretty succinctly today that it's a so-called documentary. Like, it's propaganda, is bullshit. Like, and I lived through it. I watched it. I was alive for I watched the Jordan years. I watched every single one of those finals, and Jordan was great. Like, he's, to me, top 2 basketball players in the history of the game. If you argue with me that he's the greatest basketball player that ever lived, I'm not going to argue with you like vehemently about to the contrary. I personally think LeBron James is the greatest basketball player that's ever lived, and I'm not a big LeBron fan. So it's not like I'm a huge fan of either of these guys. Like, my favorite player of all time is Dwayne Wade, followed by Magic Johnson and Shaquille O'Neal. So neither of these guys is even in my top 3. But what I will say is that documentary was so slanted, so ridiculous, so deifying of just a regular human being. It perpetuated this Jordan myth that guys who did watch it, like, with me, somehow remember it differently. Like, they romanticize this 2 kind of terrible eras of basketball. And they romanticize what Jordan did, and then you have these guys who didn't even watch it, and they're 25 years old, and all they've seen is YouTube highlights, and they will sit there and argue with you how much better Jordan was than LeBron, and how LeBron, and it always has to be to deify Jordan, you have to tear down LeBron. Jordan is this alpha. This guy today on Twitter was arguing with me that Jordan is this alpha male, and that's why he respects him. I'm like, dude, you don't know Michael Jordan, right? Like, you've never met him. Like, you don't know his actual personality. Like, you're deifying a human being. You're romanticizing this bullshit. So to me, that's what the whole documentary did for me. Like, it just solidified like what we do. We romanticize the past so freaking much, and it's just unfair to. A lot of it is unfair to LeBron, but in 20 years, we're going to do the same thing with LeBron. Like, they do it now. They're already doing the revisionist history of the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers and all this stuff. Like, we do this thing. We tear down other people to prop up other athletes and prop up other people. And that's what the whole thing signified to me. It was just complete propaganda. It was nonsense. And then ESPN has these stupid polls. Who's more amazing? Like, literally, you're supposed to be a journalistic network, and one of your poll questions to your journalist is who's more amazing. Like, it's such nonsense. But
did you guys
hey,
see that
people
video
were
on
entertained.
ESPN, the one that you're referring to?
Oh my God, that was the worst. The absolute worst. What was it? Jeremy Schaap?
I wasn't sure who it was, but I saw that, and it's what you're referring to. They said, "Oh, who's more amazing?" And they the whole thing was slanted towards Jordan. Like, Jordan got voted as a better passer,
better passer,
defender, better teammate, better off-the-court impact.
The better passer thing is amazing. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Lou Dobbs on Fox Business Channel, who was asked about, like, Trump's response. Was it to COVID or something like that? And Lou Dobbs was like, is it the best ever or only one of the greatest ever? Like, this was the poll. The thing that surprises me a little bit about the Jordan slant here with ESPN, although I guess it shouldn't surprise me because their ultimate goal is always make money and promote their own shit, is that they become the LeBron News Network. As it is. And I hate, and so I really thought that they would try to slant it more his direction. And I was there for a lot of that transformation. Okay. And it has stunned me how far the other direction, and honestly, how good a job that people like Adam Mendelsohn and Maverick Carter and Rich Paul have done getting ESPN over to their side. Because I remember, and you guys probably remember, during the Heat years, ESPN was not on their side. Was not on, and a lot of people at ESPN couldn't even get access to LeBron, and they trashed him every time they could. And now, and I'm friends with a lot of these people, but let's be honest. Rachel Nichols has bought in 100% on LeBron. They've Windhorst, McMenamin. Again, these are friends of mine, but it has gone totally over the top in that direction. And, Haynes obviously has a relationship there too. And so I'm surprised with all the LeBron deification, the clutch deification that goes on that channel. Well, I mean, Kendrick Perkins, okay, people were saying on Twitter that clutch got to him because, like, Kendrick Perkins, like, you read his tweets from a year ago, Jordan is the GOAT. And now all of a sudden LeBron is the GOAT. And it's like all he did was go work for ESPN. And so I'm a little bit surprised, even though they had the Jordan doc, that they've gone so over the edge that direction.
It's almost like they knew that the fans were going to take it in that direction anyway. So they didn't really need to do that because the fans inevitably went there. And that's been the entire conversation throughout the whole documentary. And, like I didn't necessarily walk away from it enlightened with a lot of stuff I didn't know already. Like Alf, a lot of the stuff I thought was glorified, but there is some truth to a lot of the Jordan stuff on the court. And that's where I had a lot of fun, is like watching that stuff and the highlights and kind of the locker room stuff. I thought all of that was a lot of fun. And the biggest takeaway, though, was when you listen to MJ talk. He just looks like a dude who he has amends or something is eating him up. And I hate to say that about somebody that I don't even know, but it just was so apparent through the TV screen when he would talk that he just was kind of a tortured individual. And it's just interesting to see somebody who was so immortal on the court be a mortal man that way. And it was just him talking. So they weren't packaging that, like maybe with some editing, but you could look at a dude and kind of get an idea of where he's at. And so that was eye-opening to me.
But Leif, you know what's funny? It's like when we watched him, he was mortal on the court. Like we watched him like get taken to the brink by the Knicks and like the Pacers, and like some of those teams weren't even that damn good. You know what I mean? And
no,
I'm not trying to take
he was mortal. He was mortal in bits and pieces, but I think in body of work, from that perspective, it was pretty clear that MJ was the best player on planet Earth, and nobody could really penetrate that for our when we were growing up.
But see, I remember the Bulls. Like I remember thinking, I always remember that Jordan was great, right? And I still think Jordan is great. Like to me, he's number 2 all time. I think there's no slight to that man by saying he's the second greatest basketball player that's ever lived in the history of the universe. But I also remember those teams being great. Like I was such a Horace Grant fan. Like I love to watch Horace Grant play. I remember my brother was a big Bulls fan, and his favorite player was Scottie Pippen because Pippen was amazing. And I remember the John Paxson shots and the Steve Kerr shots. Like I remember him having great teams. Like I don't remember this being this whole one-man army that like I kind of feel like even when the documentary tried to highlight other players, they highlighted other players in terms of Jordan. And I don't know, it just the whole thing just bothered me. Like it just bothered me that they kind of tore down other people's legacies to build him up.
That's one of the things. Like those teams, Jordan couldn't get it done for years. Like they were talking about Jordan ball hog. He doesn't trust his teammates. All he's in it for is the stats. Like all that was super real. And it just, when you got this right mix of Grant, Pippen, Paxson, Cartwright, they finally got over the hump, and then they rebuilt it around him a second time. So like there was lumps in the road, but overall 6 of 6 and all that kind of stuff is still noteworthy.
I mean, can we talk about the quotes that came out today from Horace Grant?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's pretty bad. He went off. So I'll read some of it. It's like 8 paragraphs of stuff from Horace Grant. I'm not going to read all of that, but I'll summarize it. He started off saying, lie, lie, lie. If MJ had a grudge with me, let's settle this like men. So that's how he starts it off. And for the rest of the time throughout, he's just kind of saying, they were editing out all the responses to all the stuff Jordan's saying. They were saying that, they kind of editorialized by basically only explaining all the things that Jordan said and not really depicting the fact that guys would actually go back at him, guys like Horace Grant or Bill Cartwright. And he kind of objected to the fact that the documentary made everybody kind of look like a beta compared to him. He then really harshly criticized his leadership style towards guys like Scott Burrell and Steve Kerr. And he went all over the place criticizing his documentary, called it a so-called documentary because they didn't really go objective, because 2 of his Jordan's like closest associates were working on it. And, he just pretty much poked holes in the whole thing. And I think the one thing where we can all agree. Yeah.
He was, but that doesn't mean everything he said everything he said came across. Editing is a powerful tool, man.
Hell yeah.
That's true.
Absolutely. I think the one thing he said was that it was very entertaining, and that's the one thing that I think we could pretty much all would say about it. Like, it was extremely entertaining, but I wanted to hear what you guys had to say about the whole objectivity thing. Like, how much were they really covering up here, even though they went through the whole gambling stuff? Like, was it objective in your eyes?
Well, they went through everything.
It wasn't objective at all.
See, I don't agree with that though. Like, okay, obviously, if you're going to be in any kind of situation on a team, there are going to be things that you know about that you think should have gotten out that didn't. And yeah, the ultimate sort of characterization of this documentary is Michael's a badass who overcomes everything and who drove people around him to be better, and he had to be an asshole sometimes to do it. Like, to me, that's the takeaway, right?
By the way, Scotty also didn't like the way he was portrayed here.
No, well, that one is interesting to me, okay, because Scotty and Michael have a really close relationship. But again, if you look at the documentary maker, apparently, I mean, he's not a Jordan disciple. I mean, he's not on Jordan's payroll, right? I do think that Michael came off in a negative light at times. He allowed a certain amount of that out. But to say that it wasn't objective in any way, I think is incorrect. With that being said, like Leif said when we started, you can't argue with the results, dude. Like, the fact is, they won the 6 finals. They won them largely on the strength of his ability and personality. I don't know what it is that they didn't cover, right? Like, Horace's issue, one of his issues, I don't know if it was that the Scotty thing was brought up with the 1.8 seconds, right? But how do you not bring that up if you're telling a narrative about Scotty? This wasn't just about Michael. This whole thing was supposed to be about the parts that were around him. You know what I think probably pisses Horace off? Is the documentary focused very little on him in a positive light. Like, whereas with Pippen, there was the positive and there was the negative. With Kerr, there was positive and there were some of his struggles. With Rodman, obviously, it was a full portrait. But like with Horace, like, all they said was they missed him that season. That's it. Was there? I mean, you're a big Horace guy, Alf. Did they talk about Horace?
Sam Smith.
Well, that's the most negative thing. But I'm saying, was there
It's
anything positive?
It's not even about the fact that they brought up the Pippen thing. It's like, how many times do they bring on some on-court Jordan pettiness, right? Like, you're going to tell me in all those years that Jordan was never just petty and just a child on the court and just complaining and whining? Like, he never did any of that? In all the years he played on the Bulls, like, he never did any of that. But was any of that highlighted? But, like, Pippen's one shining moment of being a petulant child was, like, portrayed like it was a big huge thing. But Jordan is ever the competitor, ever the all I want to do is win. He never pouted. You know, that's what the problem is. It's like it becomes like this whole thing that Jordan is just this ultimate competitor. Like I said, it's romanticized and deified. Like, he is this god among men. Where it's like the real truth. I bet you Horace Grant can tell you some truth of when Jordan was being a bitch out on the court. But that was not in the documentary.
Yeah, you think that the last straw for Horace Grant was when the reports came out that Michael wasn't letting him eat and was making him skip meals when he made mistakes? That would make me really upset if somebody said that they were doing that to me.
And they called him a snitch during the whole thing.
Yeah, and Leif, on some man shit, right? Like, it was funny. I remember when, like, Udonis came out and said if Jordan ever treated him like that, he'd have probably I'm probably misquoting here. He'd slap the life out of Jordan. And honestly, I know for a fact Udonis Haslem would have slapped the life out of Jordan if he ever called him a B or an H or all that stuff. But like, and then you had people replying to the Udonis quote that are 15 years old. Oh, he wouldn't do nothing against Jordan. Shut up. Like, you don't even know. like first of all, we know Udonis Haslem as a human being, as a person. Ethan, you've covered him for years. Right. Like, we know the fact that, like, if Jordan ever spoke sideways out of his mouth to Udonis Haslem, he would have smacked fire out of him. But
he would have. But he also would have appreciated him
now
as a teammate, though. He would have appreciated him as a teammate. I mean,
but we all girls who are acting like Jordan would have beat up Mike Tyson in his prime. Like, that's the whole problem with this documentary. We turned him into this god. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, the whole thing is kind of just silly to me.
I think when you look at, how Udonis would have reacted to him, I take this back a little bit. I know we're all supposed to bring our own topics, so I want to get to Alex here in this. Well, Alex just sort of did. We'll get to more of the Horace stuff, and I want to get to some of Leif's thoughts. But as I look at it and I say, okay, who is sort of the modern day equivalent of Michael Jordan's attitude towards his teammates? And he plays here. He's not as good as Jordan, but Jimmy Butler demands effort. I mean, from his teammates, okay? And he does it in a different way than Michael did, but more probably similar than anybody else in the same way that Kobe did. I think there's some similarities there. And Jimmy got criticized for it, right? I mean, Jimmy got criticized for it in Minnesota. He got criticized for it in Chicago. I think in Philadelphia, maybe there's a little more understanding of it. And you mentioned Udonis Haslem. Udonis Haslem loves Jimmy. He loves the way that he calls guys out. So I understand what you're saying to a certain degree about the fact. I mean, like, Haslam's quote to me as we're at Madison Square Garden walking out to the court, right, was basically, you know, when you're with cats, right? I can't remember the exact quote. He actually gave it to me and went on Bleacher Report. I can't remember it. But basically, when you're with a bunch of dogs, okay, it's fine, right? And Jimmy's with a bunch of dogs now. I think Haslam would have responded well to him, but I do think the deification of Jordan is the assumption that it made everybody better. And the reality is it probably didn't. It probably didn't, because that style doesn't work with everybody. Everybody's different. Some people respond positively to, you know, negative reinforcement and it pushes them to be better. And some respond in a really negative way and they go in a shell. And he probably had teammates who could have been better if he wasn't pushing them all the time. I mean, can we agree on that?
Absolutely.
All right.
I mean,
let's.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. The whole thing with Jimmy, the fact that his style is just bastardized and like he's been called a shitty teammate over and over again. It kind of just proves the point. Like, I'm not saying that Jordan was a shitty teammate. All I'm saying is, can we not act like he was just the end all be all? You know what I mean? That's the whole thing. Like, Jimmy's style didn't work in three places before he got here. Now it's starting to work. and honestly, and at the same time, the same way that Horace Grant is saying, Jordan couldn't. I wasn't dealing with Jordan talking to me like that. Jimmy would respect like a young Udonis Haslem. Udonis Haslem would have said straight up to Jimmy, "Don't talk to me like that." And now, if you want to make a documentary 20 years later and say that Jimmy was just talking shit to Udonis Haslem all day long, and Udonis Haslem just sat there and took it, like you're telling me you're making a slanted documentary, and I think that was Horace Grant's problem. Like, you made it sound like he was just talking shit to Horace Grant all day long, and Horace Grant just sat there like a you-know-what and took it. And that, I think that's the issue. It's not presenting both sides of it. I'm fine with Jordan's leadership style. Like, I've run restaurants and I've been in management for 2 decades. Like, I've had to do every kind of management style you could possibly imagine. I've screamed at people. I've thrown things at people. I've done everything. Right. So I understand every style of management, but at the same time, there's 2 sides of every story. And I just don't feel like this was really presented well.
All right. Now, before we get to some of the Last Dance stuff, as it might have applied to the Miami Heat, I want to tell you about one of the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. You can find them at onecalllegal.com. That's ONE. Calllegal.com. There's someone there 24 hours a day to handle your requests, whether it has to do with immigration, traffic tickets, slip and falls, personal injury, anything at all. They handle it at the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. They are based in North Miami, big Miami sports fans as well. So go check them out if you got any kind of legal issue. Obviously, the court system starting to come back now. We've closed for a little bit, but a lot of that stuff that got put off, you're going to have to deal with it soon. So go to the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm at onecalllegal.com. Again, that's onecalllegal.com. All right, let's get to one more thing here with The Last Dance, and that's the Miami Heat. And why would I bring up the Miami Heat? Because they weren't really featured much in the documentary other than, you know, Jordan sweeping them out early on. And then I don't even think there wasn't Leif, am I wrong about this? Did they focus at all on that other series, the later series during the Zoe years? I don't remember.
No, the conference finals. No, I thought that they would, because Rodman and like what he did to Alonzo was like a big deal. He kind of really threw him off that whole series. They didn't even touch on that. And the other thing they didn't touch on, unless I'm mistaken, was they didn't touch on Jordan's number being retired in Miami. Did that?
No.
Unless I'm forgetting it. And I thought that would be like an easy, low-hanging fruit that they would touch on.
Yeah, I thought that, and I also thought there'd be more Riley stuff with the Knicks. Not as much as I expected. Pat made 2 appearances, right, in the entire 10 episodes?
Yeah, really early. And then they kind of went away from him. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is if you think about the way Riley approaches the game in a lot of ways, at least when he was a coach, there were some similarities between the way Jordan was as well. And it's really fascinating to think about what Riley and MJ would have been like had they had the opportunity to hook up in the NBA.
Well, it was fascinating. We actually, Alf and I talked about that with our friend Will Weintraub, who hosts the Lessons Via Leader podcast, and I think they would have been good together. But again, Phil's style seemed to work with him after he accepted him. But let's get to what I wanted to get to related to the Heat. If Michael Jordan does not exist, do those Heat teams in the late 90s win championships, Alf?
So we're assuming Morning leaves the Hornets?
We're assuming things play out the way they play out. I know, obviously, it's butterfly effect, and, Zoe's team won a series. But I'm just saying, if the East had been clear.
I say they don't. They're not. They would have got to the finals, but they wouldn't have beat the Jazz or the Sonics. They might have beat the Sonics, but they wouldn't have beat the Jazz. The Jazz would have handed them their ass. I love those teams.
96-97, that's the year. They would have gotten all the way and gotten a ring if there was no MJ in the way.
So you think they would have – that was the first of the two Utah teams, right? That Utah team was not as good as the second Utah team. The second Utah team was better.
I'm sorry. I still think that Utah team would have handed them their ass. I think so, but honestly, it's an interesting conversation, but I also, the Heat had enough problems with the Knicks, and the Knicks weren't even that good.
PJ Brown would have been the Karl Malone stopper, baby.
He would have. Well, let's look at the matchup, okay? Timmy would have had to guard Stockton, but John wasn't blowing by anybody. He was just running that.
And that was Timmy's best year. He was first team All NBA. He would have definitely been a tough draw.
Tough cover for Stockton, right? And then you look at the
Timmy have a first year All NBA and he's not in the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry, that's off topic.
It's not off topic because it's ridiculous. I'm with you. Okay, I think Tim Hardaway has been historically disparaged in a lot of ways because of one comment he made on the Dan Le Batard show, which he actually then went back and not only did he take it back, but he did the work in the community to prove that he changed his opinion and still hasn't been able to clear it, whereas other guys have been able to get in. I find it ridiculous also, but is what it is. He would have made Stockton work. If you look at the rest of that team, who was the two on that team? Vashon?
Yep.
And so he would have guarded. He would have guarded Hornacek. They didn't have a matchup for Mash, right? Brian Russell probably would have guarded Mash.
Russell, that was a really good matchup for Mash, actually.
Right. And Zoe, at least with Zoe's size,
he refused an interview on the Last Dance.
Oh, Malone did or Zoe did?
Malone and Byron Russell both refused to be interviewed.
I'm not surprised. Well, Malone's refused a lot of interviews lately. I know it's before Alex's time, but he's still with us. That was pretty early on. As we look at. Right, yeah, exactly. But as we look at it though, just looking at them on paper and kind of what they look like, I don't necessarily agree with Alf's theory that they couldn't get past the Knicks and the Knicks weren't that good. The Knicks were a uniquely difficult matchup for that Heat team. Can we agree on that? I don't think it was. I don't think it's necessarily.
It was mental.
It was mental, right? It was mental and emotional with them.
Yeah, but if you're having a mental issue in the first rounds of the playoffs, you're gonna tell me that team mentally stacked up in the finals and all that under all that pressure. I'm not trying to disparage those teams because I really like those teams. I enjoyed them, but at the same time, I just don't know. I'm not that confident that they could have beat the Jazz.
Any of the other teams during that era? You look at. The Heat never really got a shot at that Pacer team, right? They just didn't cross paths with Reggie's team at that time. They did later when Reggie was older. And obviously they did later with other Pacers teams. It basically just was they kept running into the Knicks. What was crazy about it too was, they kept getting the high seeds and then kept drawing the Knicks. And no matter where it is that the Knicks fell, they ended up hit that spot. Even the 1-8 year, somebody was saying in 99, and we can close here. Somebody was saying, there are people saying, well, the Heat, the way the Bulls documentary ended was we wanted to come back and get our 7th, right? And I do believe that if Jordan had gotten in a room, all right, with Pippen and with the rest of that group, that they would have all rolled it back for one more year. I think if Phil was coming back, they would have done it. But this was an interesting point, which was made by Vishnu, who's in our network. The lockout season was that year, right? 98, 99. And Vish's point was that the Bulls would have been totally broken down that season because that was, one of those years you were playing a lot of games in a tight, compressed space. I think it actually would have worked in their favor. I think Phil would have rested those guys for a lot of that year. They would have ended up with the 8th seed instead of the Knicks, would have been playing the Heat in the first round, and would have knocked the Heat out in the first round of the playoffs. That's how I think it would have.
I think it would have looked like the 2014 Heat.
Wheezing,
the just exhausted, mental exhaustion, and just even with a shortened season. Because remember, the 2014 Heat wasn't physical exhaustion; it was mental exhaustion. They were just mentally exhausted, and they were just tired. Like that's the thing that's hard about these dynasties. It's like these 3 to 4 year spans. It's all you can really take. Because after that, it's just a lot. It's just too much. And Jordan breaking up by going to play baseball is kind of what saved that dynasty. It's hard to do. Like it's hard to do what the Lakers and the Celtics did in the '80s and just stick together for a decade. Like that shit is hard. I think that would have looked a lot like the Heat that went against the Spurs in that finals. It just wheezed into the finals, and we even as Heat fans, we didn't feel good about them at all.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, we always talk about it as if, it would have been the same mental challenge to go through the entire time without that break. And it would have been a much bigger mental challenge. You're right. And Michael said it even at the end of those first 3, he was worn out then, right? So maybe if he comes back for those 4th and 5th seasons, they don't win those seasons, or they don't win those seasons and then he decides to shut it down at that point. So we don't really know what would have happened. I just think that even if they'd gotten to 99, I think Phil was already starting to do. I know Michael was playing heavy minutes in the playoffs, but Phil was already starting to do, some of that load management stuff. I think he might have load managed them a little bit. One of Riley's weaknesses, in my view, during this era, and we can close here, is that he didn't load manage his guys at all. And so, to me, one of the big problems, Alf, that they had when they went against the Knicks, and I think this really came up in that 99 season, is that he was pushing guys so hard during the regular season, and he maxed out those teams. Like those teams were they won as many games as you could possibly win with those groups in the regular season, and there was no level for them to get to mentally, emotionally, physically. Whereas those Knicks teams, a lot of them, that last team, that team that coasted to 6 fewer wins than the Heat during the lockout season, like that team didn't play hard at all during the regular season. They were getting killed during the whole regular season. And then all of a sudden they played better in the playoffs. They played the Heat and all that. And what's funny is the one Riley team that underachieved was the 05-06 team. And then they raised it a level in the postseason. And that's the only team that really operated.
I was just going to say that. He learned from his mistakes because he definitely had some load management going on with that 05-06 group.
Yeah. They got to a level they didn't get to. So, all right, check out 5reasonsports.com. Check out Greg Sylvander at Greg Sylvander on Twitter. Obviously, Alf954 and Tropical Blanket. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.